And then live watchers will be joining us. So hello to our live people. Well, hopefully everyone that listens to this is alive. Actually, as long as the stats count, I don't mind either way. To be fair. Okay, cool. Yeah, I'm really excited about this episode. Actually, I think without further ado, we'll get into it, shall we? Well, Natalie, you've just gone really 8-bit for me. Nothing you can do about it. That's why we do the this.
Let's do it. It's go time.
Hello and welcome to Go Time. I'm Matt Ryer. Today we're talking about cross-platform graphical user interfaces. Joining me, my co-host, Natalie Pistunovich. Hello, Natalie.
Hi, Matt. Happy Nowruz.
Thank you very much. What is that?
Persian New Year.
Oh.
Which is on the first day of the spring, which is the equinox day.
Ah, lovely. So this is where the days start to get longer now for us in the northern
daylight
hemisphere.
hours start getting longer.
Yeah. Well, not for everybody, because we're also joined by Lee Anthony, staff software engineer for Safety Culture in Sydney and creator of Wails, and coming in live from Australia, right, Lee? Welcome.
Welcome, yes. Thank you so much. It's good to be here again.
Yeah, it's good to have you back. We're also joined... I'm sorry?
How is everybody?
Oh, yeah, there's going to be a delay, isn't there, with Australia?
There is, yes.
It's because the nights are getting longer.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what's going to happen now. Bless you. Well, this is weird. I sort of like not sure if I believe Australia yet. We'll get into that later. I've never been, but just, skeptical. I like to just ask questions. That's all I'm doing. We're also joined by Andy Williams. Andy's a tech leader in Scotland, software engineer and open source contributor for over 20 years. And Andy, you created Fyne, the graphical user interface package in Go, and you were a core developer on Enlightenment and Maven too, which is kind of amazing. Welcome.
Oh, thanks very much, Matt. It's great to be here. Nice to meet you, Lee and Natalie as well. Hope everybody's having a great day. I'm glad to hear that we're heading into more daylight because, obviously we're very far north here, so maybe that brings a little bit of sunshine.
Yeah, that's very good. Very polite introduction as well. I think I'd like a lot of our guests to pay attention to that for next time.
Noted.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So first of all, graphical user interfaces. How do you pronounce? Do you say GUIs? Do you say that?
So I always said GUI, and I thought it was just the easiest way to get it over. Everybody knew what you were talking about until I saw somebody taking notes. I was talking about a GUI book, and they were writing down what to go and read, and they just wrote GOOEY, and I just thought, oh wow, we just increased the barrier to understanding by saying it that way.
Yeah, that's true. And also a GUI book. No one wants to read that, do they? You can't put it down because, of course,
Hey!
Yeah. Lee, do you say GUI?
I do. Is there another way?
Well, GUI, I've heard that.
No.
Natalie?
Nah.
GUI team.
GUI team. I like it. GUI. It's also, I don't know, it's quite endearing. I did work at a place where it was used as a kind of, there was a team where they had the very strong feeling that back-end engineering was the grown-up engineering, and then front-end were just putting nice pictures on things, and they used it as a hate term in that place, which was a shame.
Wow.
Yeah.
I think I have heard people refer to graphical developers and maybe GUI as coloring pencil jockeys, but probably not endearingly.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know why. It's interesting. And I do think this has changed, actually. Like, this genuinely was a thing where front, and you do sometimes see it, don't you, on Twitter? It'll make the rounds. Someone wants some clicks or they want some views, so they'll say something like, "Oh, HTML's not real," or "CSS is made up," which is a fair point. It kind of is, but still, I mean, I think front end engineering in a lot of ways is harder than depending on the problem. Like, at least in the back end, you've got kind of consistent ins and outs. The front end, who knows what the users are going to do? They're people. They're so unpredictable. They can click anything. So, Natalie, do you say GUI?
I do say GUI, and I also think that sometimes machines can click interfaces, right? That's why we have those captcha checks.
Yeah, that's
we
true.
don't want, for some reason, for machines to click on things.
Yeah.
We're asking them to help us to check
Makes-
that they are human.
Makes me wonder whether we should on like programmatic APIs, whether we should have a thing that says, "Are you a human?" and you have to say no in order to pass it.
You just invented the user agent.
Yeah. Okay, good. So I feel like we've got the important stuff solved. Then we're going to call them GUIs. But you don't really associate Go with building GUIs, really, do you? Go's kind of like tends to have a reputation as being the sort of systems language, back-end services, APIs, that kind of thing. But you can use it, can't you, Lee?
That's right, Matt. You can. I think, Go's a general purpose language like most languages, so why not? What is it about Go that would be what's that word? Oh, it's too early. Bad about using Go for GUIs?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I don't think it is bad. Andy?
Well, I mean, absolutely, I would agree. It's a really great fit. You do hear it from a number of people saying, well, that's not what the language was built for. But I mean, like Lee says, a general purpose language, the usefulness of it is not defined by its standard library or what people necessarily originally created it for. Instead, what do people find that it fits well with, and where does it gain traction? And from what I've seen, and I'm sure I'm not the only one on the call here, folk are just absolutely jumping in with it and finding that the fit is really good. If you kind of disconnect it from the idea that servers are what it was originally built for and look at things like the memory management, the garbage collection, the static typing that helps you have really well-defined APIs, you've got something that's pretty solid. And then I mean, if Go's going to be able to solve all these cross-platform challenges for us, then why would you not use it to solve one of the biggest challenges out there in graphical apps, which is just getting something onto all of these different platforms? I think that the fit is tremendous. Yeah.
Yeah. And maybe we could dig in a little bit to your projects, your respective projects, because they both kind of like provide this kind of capability, but they do it in quite different ways. Lee, for anyone that's not familiar with Wails, can you tell us how to spell it and also what it is and how it works, please?
Yeah. It's so Wails is spelled WALIS. It was a bit of a play on words back in the day. I found a project called WebView, and I wanted to be able to create a graphical application using HTML. And the reason for that was because I was using it in my day job, so it was something I was already familiar with. And I found something called WebView, and it was quite good, but I sort of wanted a higher level experience with it. There was a lot of stuff missing, so I kind of thought, well, why don't I write some, not libraries, but like functions, and build the IPC out and get the communication between the front and the back end, because they are different worlds. So I spent a long time doing that, and it was I kind of felt like it was a bit like Rails, Ruby on Rails, and so it was kind of a play on words for that. It's one I semi-regret, but also not as well. So the project is, well, it's, I don't know, it just kind of evolved, and
That's a great
like
name.
the project, I guess.
And you're also from Wales.
Yeah, you'd think I would have thought about that, right? But I didn't. It just suddenly dawned on me one day. Oh yeah, maybe that's where it came from. But yeah, it's the project is for people who want to write HTML apps in Go, and so it provides a lot of tooling around that.
Yeah. So how do they? So you write like web, basically almost like web front ends, don't you?
Yeah, so I think one of the spaces that Go is like reasonably big in is for generating applications on the website, so websites and stuff like that. So there is sort of a little bit of affinity there between the two worlds, but yeah, it's I mean it's kind of evolved into more kind of an electronic thing where there's tray menus, application menus, dialogues, all that sort of stuff. It wasn't really what I was going for originally. It was kind of just to scratch an itch so I could build a program. It turns out I've never built a program in the 4 years it's been running. So yeah, it was just so much fun building the toolkit. I kind of got lost in it. So
That's amazing. But I like the fact, again, it's an example of something where, like you say, you were scratching your own itch, where you're solving your own problem. And you hear this again and again. And it's always my advice to like engineers that want to do something, like younger engineers maybe, or if they're new to tech, is always to that: solve a problem that you have, a real problem. Like really solving problems is what we're doing here, and the tech is a means to do that. Andy, so Fyne doesn't work quite like that, does it? It's slightly different, takes a different approach.
Yeah, absolutely. I suppose just in case anybody doesn't know, we also picked a strange spelling. It's Fyne, so not necessarily what you would think out the door, but with a slight geographic connection. It's a place in Scotland, so
it's the same, like, so Wails and Fyne. I mean, this is amazing.
Inspiration comes from funny places. No, but you're quite right. We took a different route to designing the toolkit when Fyne was being thought up. I come from a background where I'd done a lot of native app development recently, but I'd also been working with cross-platform tools in the Enlightenment project. That had its pros and its cons. Apple's toolkit, again, had some really great benefits to it, but it was basically single platform at the time. And I'd seen a few things come and go, like Swing and others. And I just sat down one day and thought, you know what, actually, there has to be a better way to be able to write something with a programming language and idiomatic code that just executes on any platform. And so that was the approach that I took, basically. A very simple architecture of how it might work was set out, a simple API and structure. And then, actually, it was when I had thought about that, I came to the Go language and realized that it was a really great fit. It just so happened that I didn't find anything similar in the language, which of course was a little bonus. But you're quite right. This leads to applications that, at least for the end developer, is written in pure Go. And so whether you prefer this approach or not, it fits quite nicely with the language. And you are just writing using the standard structs, interfaces, methods, and functions. And so that worked quite nicely. It keeps your code maintainable, but it offers a few little benefits, like we get unit testing baked in because it's really solid in the language and we're reusing the language constructs. So I think that the fit, at least for what I'm trying to achieve, has been pretty good there. And it's a route that I like to take, but it certainly does have trade-offs because we don't get some of the things that you would with an HTML-based solution, like real-time editing. So we're definitely building applications, like solid engineered applications, but it's what Go's great at.
How do the tests look like for the UI?
So essentially the widgets are broadly advertising like a behavior-based API. And so your unit tests are testing the behaviors. So you might create an entry, and then you might say, type this text into the entry, and then you could validate that the text is correct. You could ask our test package to then double tap the entry, and you could validate that the word is selected by checking its selected text with some excellent unit testing frameworks. Of course, many are available. Testify may be the one that we're using, but there you go. And so that basically is helping to validate, but super fast, that things are functioning correctly. We realized, though, that sometimes you do just want to see what's going on. So you can test the state of the rendering as well. You can persist it to an image and do a graphical comparison and compare programmatically as well. Or, because anti-aliasing and other challenges make it a little imprecise, you could do that with an XML tree. But the really nice thing is it executes super fast because it's just standard in-memory unit test, so nothing displayed to screen at all, which is a nice benefit.
And then when you test something like you mentioned, double clicking a button, is it like, let's pretend the double click happened and then something, or do you have some external script that would double click things for you?
It doesn't go through any external systems because it's executing in memory. Essentially, what's happening is we're loading a test driver which is simulating the application run. So your widget loads fully in an application that is in memory and not rendering to screen. So when you say double tap this widget, it is causing the event chain to kick off as though the user was double clicking something that was on the screen, but without having to go through any operating system connection.
That is cool.
Thanks.
Awkward silences will be removed from the
I
edit.
have to say that to anybody who's not watching the live but listening to this later, Matt has this camera that follows you around and he's like moving back and forth and then it just follows him around. So you can just watch that like a lava lamp. So this explains all the awkward silences from now until the end of the episode. You can put this in editing if you want.
Yeah, it's one of those Apple Studio displays, and it just has a wide angle camera, and then it uses software to track your face. And if someone else comes in, it'll zoom out, and it's okay. It's just that sometimes you want to be off camera for a minute, and you might forget that it's going to follow you around. So
now that Nat has said lava lamp, I can't unsee it because Matt's red jumper is just really fitting that description very well.
yeah, just like floating around like this.
If this is not convincing people to start watching live, I don't know what will.
Yes,
Yeah.
I think we're also on YouTube as well. You can actually watch the raw. Is that right, Natalie? I'm not sure about that. Are we on?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, we are on YouTube, and at least one person confirmed that is watching live. Hi, Mike Dotson. We appreciate that.
Oh, hi, Mike. Yeah, but this is essentially a podcast. It's not just for Mike.
But we are talking about visuals today.
Yeah, we are talking about visuals as well. Yeah.
Solid
Okay. Cool.
segue.
To what?
Whatever, really.
We can
Yeah.
also talk about audio. I cannot help but notice that, Lee, in your description of the repo, you also mentioned all the albums that you were listening to while you were writing this.
Yeah, I don't know why I did that, but I think I saw it in some other repo, and I thought, that's interesting. What an interesting way to kind of share maybe some lesser known bands. I think that was, just before streaming happened, so I think people kind of naturally find, through recommendations or whatever. But back then, it was quite. Yeah, I don't know why I did that, but it was quite good fun, and it was interesting because some of the people actually contacted me and said, "Oh, I've listened to this band. It's great." So, yeah. Do anybody else do that? Have you ever seen that in any other repos?
No, I've never seen that. And so
right.
if you go to github.com/whalesapp/whales, WAILS,
You'll also find that in the show notes.
you will find that in the show notes. But I don't. Who reads the show notes? Do you read the show notes? I don't read the show notes.
I write them.
Oh, yeah.
You write them, yeah. Yeah, thanks for that. So the unit testing stuff's quite interesting. What in Fyne? What does the front end code look like itself? Like, is it? Do you end up having big sort of nested objects, essentially, sort of describing the user interface?
Yeah, I mean, you totally can if that's your preference. You could set out the essentially like the object structure of your user interface as one big struct. We do support that approach to writing, as you can, with any rich structure data set in your Go code. But also the use of constructor functions helps us to break it down into smaller components, which I quite like. One of the design principles is to keep things encapsulated, so your widgets, or rather, the standard widgets or any third-party widgets could be reused in any context at all. So if you're doing it that way, then you might have a function that sets out your main screen, and that might call different functions to insert panels into the parent container at the right places, like build my toolbar or set out my tree layout. And I like to encourage this because I'm a fan of clean code and the idea of smaller functions that do just one thing, and it fits quite nicely in that way. But I would have one structure, like an application structure, or maybe one per screen of your application, that's tracking the important aspects, anything that you want to go back to and check for, like an entry or an output widget you might want to have, so that you can reference it later. That can be quite helpful. Oh, sorry, I had one other thought in my mind. Oh, yes. The benefit really of having these pluggable widgets fits very nicely with Go's ability to import third-party code from anywhere using this, the standard Git lookups on an import. So you can take a third-party component, drop that into yours via an import and a new constructor, and it just appears in your UI. So things like our terminal widget, you can drop a fully functional terminal into any Fyne application just because that is a widget that you can drop in anywhere. And this is a unusual flexibility I find for native application development. It's another one of those things I cherish about the design, and it was down to Go really that this was possible.
Yeah, and so I guess Lee, in Wales, when you build the front end, what does that look like? It's HTML, JavaScript. Is it CSS as well?
Yeah, so you develop your application just like you would any website, I guess. You just use the NPM ecosystem or whatever ecosystem of your choosing. You can use whichever toolkits that are already existing. There's not much more to say about it other than if you've developed a website before, then you can develop an app. Using Wails. So.
Yeah. Yeah, I like this. I like this common theme of transferable skill. Like there isn't obviously there's going to be things to learn, but pretty much like if you've got Go, if you've got web front end things, you can pick up these tools and start to use them. And I always think that's quite a good, quite important really. The developer experience for these things is quite important because classically building, particularly, never mind cross-platform, but actually just building graphical user interfaces anyway, it's quite funky. I've written some bits for macOS trying to interact with the operating system, and it's difficult. Like it's not easy. You're outside the comfort zone often, and these frameworks kind of give you solve that. But tell me a bit about the cross-platform, because this is something that a lot of us may do for whether they're GUI apps or not, like writing for cross-platforms. Is that easy just because Go builds for them all? And I suppose you've got graphic. Tell me, is it easy?
Yes,
that's my question. Is it just because you just write it once and it works? It can't do, right?
I think surely it can. It's the dream that we're both chasing, and absolutely it's possible. I'm not going to say it's easy for the toolkit, but the ambition is that that's exactly how it works. You have an application and you can run it on your system and know that it's going to run exactly the same on others, whether it's another architecture, another operating system of your desktop, or maybe a tablet device or a phone or whatever it might be. If the platform is listed as supported, you've got basically guarantees that the app is going to work exactly the same.
Right. So for users of that, but what about? So tell me about building that then. So writing cross-platform code. Whether people are writing GUIs or not, Go people writing Go, targeting different architectures. Obviously, you can just build for any architecture, but when you're interfacing with the front end components and things, that's different in every operating system, isn't it?
I think the interfacing with the front end isn't necessarily different on the operating systems, but I think the thing that's quite tricky is every operating system provides things that are a little bit different to the others. So, for instance, the file dialog, for instance, in one operating system, it could be that you can create directories and folders in the native dialog, but in another one, you might not be able to do that. And so that sort of disparity between what the native toolkits provide, and I'm not talking about our own toolkits, I'm talking about, the stuff that the operating system gives you. I think bridging that's quite tricky. So the way that Electron does it, I think, is they essentially give you all of the options, and then next to each of the options, you have to decide. Yeah, it will tell you like this is for Mac or this is for Windows only. I think there's no. I think it's a classic problem. Right? Like there's no good way of solving that. One of the approaches I took early on was, if it's not on all of them, then don't do it. And so you get this kind of like it works on all the platforms. But then people would come back and say, well, what about this? A good example of that is when we did XBAR. So the application icon in the tray in Mac can show text, but in Windows it can't. So if you write an application that needs to do that, then you've now got a real big problem in porting that to Windows. I'm sure there's plenty of other examples of that.
Yeah, so this is, I think, that practice then of doing well in the abstraction. When you design an abstraction over anything, that's always the challenge you have. Do you go lowest common denominator so that you know everything's going to work everywhere? Do you have like some kind of capabilities API or something so that you if you call something that's not available, is that an error at runtime? How does it work?
Is Lee, you jumping in there?
Yeah.
I feel like we might have different answers.
Yeah. I think it's not necessarily a runtime error, but it's just not supported. So if you open up a file dialog and request that you can create directories, then you're going to get a dialog that doesn't. So there's not much you can do about that. That's just what it is.
Yeah.
So I think the target binary will have slightly different capabilities on the different platforms, but the code could be the same. So the Go code would be the same, but
But what about for capabilities that are where you just don't have that concept? Are there any concepts that exist in one operating system that don't exist in others?
So I was just thinking I could pick this one up because slightly differently when it comes to what a native system can and can't do, we're not particularly lowest common denominator in Fyne, but we do provide a lot of functionality replacing what the local system should be doing. So for example, we have a file dialog that will display for the application built with our toolkit rather than the native, which means that you've got consistency and a completely usable application on systems that just aren't fully provided for. For a moment here, I'm looking at UBSD, particularly maybe Open or NetBSDs. They're not really graphical platforms, but a Fyne application is going to load and run and be fully functional on them out of the box. So we had to provide a bunch of functionality and code it up ourselves to fill in these gaps. But of course, you do have things that aren't going to be available on all platforms. There are specifics that mobile has that it can make available that a desktop is not going to deliver, or the desktop would have. Actually, it's amusing that you mentioned XBAR and the system tray concept, because this is something that really mobile doesn't have. I mean, there's notification areas and there's things that can technically be done, but the concept is not the same. Actually, with the Fyne API, we took a nod from type checking here and using interfaces to provide extended capabilities. So an application, the interface application provides all of the things that are guaranteed to work on any system. You can show a notification and open a window or open a URL to a local browser, something like that. But the system tray isn't part of that because we can't guarantee it's going to work. So we have a desktop package that defines an extension on the app. And so you can do a type check in your code. So at runtime, the implementation of the application is going to vary, but your code can be checked by the compiler to make sure that you're not going to do something that could crash at runtime, or that you're not using functionality that won't be available. I'm not going to say we get it right every time, and abstractions can be wrong for sure, but we're working really hard to make sure that if you can auto-complete it in your IDE, then it's going to function.
That's interesting then. So do you have, these are interfaces then, and you literally use the little the type assertion and the second argument, the OK, to check, and then that's how you know if a certain capability is available or not?
Yeah, exactly. So you could do a type check for desktop.app, type check it on your app instance, and that would then allow you to access system tray. I think if you did mobile.app, it would expose information about the device capabilities like orientation and other sensors that are not really built into a piece of hardware that sits on a desk.
Yeah. So how does the code end up? Oh, sorry, let go.
Oh no, sorry. I was just going to say, does that change depending on the platform you're developing on? So if you're developing on Windows and you want to say do the text on the tray icon, does it, and you hit the dot, do you see the same thing, or?
That's a very good point. That does work if your IDE understands the target that you're currently testing for. So you would need to drop in the variables that adjust the IDE to the platform that you want to ask about. And that way you can kid it into thinking that the type assertion will work or won't work depending on the tags that have been set. So maybe autocomplete isn't always the right way to go, but well, actually that said, it should still work because it knows the interface, it just doesn't know if the type assertion is going to pass. So most of the time it should work. I'm sure there's instances where it's not quite that straightforward. But I believe, no, for the most part it does. I mean, people ask, I think I found an issue, I did these things and it doesn't do what I was expecting, is this a known issue? And I like to be able to say, well, if you were able to tell it to do something in code and it didn't do it, then it's probably a bug, not some misconfiguration or user mistake, because we try to keep a pretty lean API and something that's understandable and pretty much guaranteed to work.
Yeah, thanks.
Did the introduction of generics make your life easier?
The introduction of generics has not reached my life, I'm afraid. I know that it is going to make some things better, but I was quite happy to sit in the sidelines and wait for a while until a lot of folk had tried very hard to see where that really was going to benefit. So we have some data binding APIs that help you to connect a piece of data with a graphical element on the front end directly, so you don't need to wire any boilerplate code, you don't need to handle any events or changes. And that, internally at least, would be improved by generics because we do code generation at the moment. However, we're not in a place to be able to pick that up at the moment because we support versions of Go way back before generics were a thing. Partly because I want people to be able to build their apps with whatever Go is installed on their system by default. And some systems are not yet fully up to date with a Go that's new enough. I think 1.15 is still standard on Debian stable. So we're kind of waiting until their next release when it goes up to 18, I think. But the other thing is, we do still support the Go 1.14 API because it was the last version that supported ARM32 for Apple devices. And there's just a part of my heart that is not excited about condemning that millions of devices to the scrap heap because the compiler team agreed with Apple's assertion that those were legacy devices. So we're going to have to make a change, and people are pushing for it, of course, because the new language features are great. And so at some point this year, we will be upgrading our lowest common supported version. But even so, I'm not entirely convinced that generics is going to make a massive difference to our API.
Yeah, and Lee, Wails has the same kind of idea, doesn't it, where you combine types, and I guess you just use interfaces at the moment. Will generics help there or change things for you?
Yeah, I don't know really. I think like Andy, I've just been sat back and waiting to see what happens on the generics front. For me, generics, the best use case for it is things like data structures and some of the stuff you wouldn't necessarily deal with directly. Yes, there is some very useful cases where you want to reuse perhaps some functionality across different types, and you want to be able to reuse that. I haven't really seen that many places where that would be useful for me. I think there's perhaps one use case where I've been looking at the concept of developing a state store So I'm a big fan of Svelte, and the state store in Svelte is so ridiculously simple and useful that I kind of like this idea that I'd love to use that in Go, but to be a kind of a bridge. And so you'd have this common state store. And I think, the original implementation of that, I did do one once. It used the interface, the blank interface, and there was some problems with it. You put a lot of the onus on the developer to do type conversions for all of the different things, and what happens if you want to change that, and it wasn't a great solution. I thought generics may help with that, so you could maybe create multiple stores and you store different things in them and kind of use the same code. I'm still looking at that. It's not something that I've really spent an awful lot of time at, but yeah, still, I don't know, jury's still out for me.
It's a bit of an unexpected answer, because in all the conversations I was listening to about pros and cons of generics, many times the examples of pro were user input, right? And I was thinking that GUIs, I would hear 2 yeses and not 2 not yet. But that's a very refreshing answer. Those are very refreshing answers.
Yeah, we need to do a dig in on this. We need to do a Go Time episode on generics and a sort of state of the union and see what's going on and see how people are using it well, if it's been abused. Yeah, very interesting. So if you started again today with these projects, is there anything you'd do differently?
Wow. I have an immediate thought that came to mind because we did a stable sorry. We made a stable API quite early on. We announced 1.0 in possibly the second year of development. A lot of people criticized us. That's far too early. You can't possibly meet the semantic API guarantee and support that ongoing. Now, we did manage to. There's not been any unexpected breakages, but we needed to introduce a V2 package a couple of years ago for some breaking changes. And so obviously the simple answer for me is I wouldn't have made those mistakes in the first API design, even though it took us a while to understand why. And so underpinning it was realizing the complexity of the rendering something that's going to work across different platforms when you just have such a massive diversity of screen output types, the difference in pixel density, sizes, and all sorts of things. The underlying problem was I thought that the output type would be an int to address pixels on screen because, of course, pixels are pretty standard. And if we were scaling up, we would follow, I guess, Apple's assertion that you've got 1 times, 2 times, and 3 times images for the greater pixel density screens. And we modeled that for a while and it worked okay. And then it started to fall apart because we introduced an animation API which would transition something from one place to another place if you used a move animation. And when you have the integer level precision for the output device and you're scaling it up, the intermediate values just don't exist. And we jumped. And so we had to move it to a float-based numbering system instead. So I wish I hadn't made that mistake because it was the one that truly was a breaking change when we had to upgrade. But it's incredible when you get into the complexity that is overlooked when you don't understand the domain you're getting into. And in case, of course, any young impressionable people are listening, don't build your own graphical toolkit. It's just safer to walk away.
Or if you do, maybe your advice should be always use floats.
Well, I'm not too sure that I would. I don't think I'd stand by that. Somebody would probably take away my software engineering license if I said to always use floats.
Mm-hmm. Well, okay.
It will also take hardware off your hands, like FPGAs.
Yes.
Yeah. What about you, Lee? Do you use ints and floats?
Well, it's interesting that Andy said that because, part of going into the Apple toolkits, I noticed they do use floats for a lot of things that I wouldn't expect. And so I didn't really know why. So thanks, Andy. I learned something today. That's great.
Excellent.
Yeah, I mean, I think if I was to start again, I think the biggest mistake I probably made in developing Wails was, with all good intention, is in making the developer experience as easy as possible. And so it wasn't just the library. It's it's all of the tooling around it, and all of the things that you try and make easier. You try and address problems like, how do I stand up a project quickly? How can I develop certain aspects of the application easier? How do I develop this at runtime? How can I run it and alter it in real time? So how do I alter the UI in real time? And so there's a lot of tooling built around that, with all good intention, and for the most part it's worked pretty well. The ability to be able to open a browser and use whatever extension for your language of choice or your toolkit of choice, it's great. So it was great to be able to do all of that stuff and be able to provide all of those things. However, I would say that probably 90% of bugs reported are in the tooling and not in the actual library, right? So, so we're actually looking at kind of rolling that back a bit. So instead of the tooling being sort of a bit of a black box and doing all of these little things for you and working in ways you don't expect, we're actually just going to move a lot of that as to single how can I explain, single operations. So if you want to convert your icon, say, it's a single operation. And what we're going to use is task file. I don't know if you've seen task file, but it's a bit like make written in Go. And we're using that to basically orchestrate all of that stuff that you would normally do. So hopefully then that gives a lot more power back to the developer in being able to have that flexibility of choosing whatever, tools that they want to use and develop, the build pipeline in whatever way they want to do. So that would be, that's probably what I would have started with in hindsight.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I do love this focus on the developer experience. I think that is a lesson that anyone that's building really any package that you expect other people to use, they're your users. It's user experience is kind of vital. And so I love that.
Sorry, I was just going to say it's bang on. It's about the experience that other people are having using your tool, which led me to say just one more I would have done differently. I think, and it applies for any library, get a bigger community involvement really early on. Don't try and build something that demonstrates what you're doing. Try and get people involved in the concept who can collaborate at the early stage of the design, whether they've got expertise in the area or if they're absolutely completely green and have no idea whatsoever. Both are going to have really good feedback on what you're trying to do, and probably will help you try to do it as well. Our community, in fact, the whole Go community is so supportive and encouraging. They love to get involved and help out. So it's great that they're here, but I think I did not make enough of that early stages. I thought, I'll just build a first version to prove that it's possible.
Mm-hmm. I can understand that, but I think that is such a good point, and that, again, is a lesson that applies in lots of different places, I think, and also nice for anyone that is sort of new to tech that wants to get involved in something, because they often feel like, what could I do? What use am I? But actually, your perspective is really valuable, and that they don't realize how valuable that is, because sometimes if you've been around a long time, you have all this knowledge that you don't even know about, really, and that colors a lot of what you end up doing. So it's an asset if you have everything. Yeah, it's a superpower, really, if you're brand new and you don't know something, or you don't know enough about something. It's so should never feel like you're useless.
I think just to take that one step further, Wails is probably it's basically the first open source project I've done. So I'm a software developer. I'm not a community maintainer, and have learnt the hard way of how to deal with certain aspects of doing that. And I think one of the things, if you're going to start off, one of the things you should nail down pretty early on is how that interaction works. So if you want a feature or you want to report a bug, or there should be a process for that, because getting all of these opinions it's a two-edged sword. It's a wonderful thing. You can harness some really good creative energy, but you also need to be able to put in some guards and some guidelines on how that process works to depersonalize perhaps part of that process, because you're not going to accept everything. you're not going to accept everybody's ideas. You're going to think some of them are good. You're going to think some of them are bad. And I think you have to have kind of like a framework in place to be able to manage that. Otherwise, your project could go in weird directions that is very hard to maintain, or you have very specific features for one edge case. I don't know how you've dealt with that, Andy, but it's yeah, I mean, like, it's an ongoing challenge for us.
You're absolutely right. It's difficult, it's crucial, and not everybody is going to be excited to be on the side of a conversation where something doesn't get landed. Unfortunately, it can get personal quite quickly. I think it's really important to talk about, the idea or the concept separate to who created it. So if you are in a conversation about something, if you've got 2 or 3 people discussing pros and cons of the approach that you could take, be sure to be describing and discussing the idea rather than referencing, oh, this was the one that person stated, because you can disconnect the personal. I think other than that, like you say, defining these things carefully, community guidelines, contributor guidance, so that when you do have to push back on something, you can say, okay, well, because of these reasons here, it doesn't really fit with how we do things. And one of the mantras I try to have in this area, and this goes for core contributors and first-time contributors alike, if we can't find a thing to point at, one of the rules or guidelines that indicates what it is that we're not seeing the alignment on, that we're not happy with, if we can't find the right reason to say this isn't good enough because, then our rules need to be updated, because it should never be a subjective judgment whether you accept something or not. The quality isn't good enough because we expect this bar, or that API doesn't fit with how we do things because this is how we design our APIs, and that definitely helps. It's not going to work in every situation, and sometimes you just have the back of your mind, and I think this is maybe like a maintainer or creator type of thing. I think it could be done a better way or a different way, or something that I've had percolating for a while. But in that case, maybe you can help the contributor get their code to a place where it fits better with what you thought was going to be a future or the right route for something. It doesn't happen often, and it does sort of verge on subjectivity, but often you can say, well, because of this other thing that we're planning on doing, that potentially conflicts, so could it be explored in another way? And I think people usually understand that because they don't have, especially if they're new to a project, the understanding of all of the things that are coming. But even in that case, the more you share, the less surprised they'll be, and the more the better directed contributions can be.
But what about issues of personal taste, Andy? Like sometimes there is just a choice and it's not clear if there's a particularly right or wrong way, but you just prefer a thing. How do you deal with that?
I think it comes down to agreeing that there is something that is preferred by the community and it's written down. Now, of course, if we were just in an older project using a language that was less sophisticated, we could say, well, should it be tabs or spaces? But we've been lifted free of this burden because there is a standard that everybody just agrees is the right way to go. Honestly, I don't think that Go code is formatted how I used to format code, but I don't really care too much because it's the right way to write Go code. And if you can express all of the things that could be subjective in that kind of way and say, look, this is just how this community is. These are the rules for contributing. If it's not what you like, we completely understand. But kind of, go with it our way, or we're going to turn back the PR, because honestly, it's a terrible thing to accept somebody's work and then modify it so it fits. For one thing, it's extra work for the people who are working on other things in the core project already. But also, I've heard contributors be very downhearted because they put something in and then it was immediately modified and they feel like their work has been questioned or adjusted to fit a higher standard that they weren't helped to achieve in the first place.
Interesting. Do you have to say no a lot?
Yes. However, I try to say no because, or if I can, say, well, I have an uncertainty or a concern in this area. So it's not actually a no, but it's not a yes either.
Very
Somebody I've
diplomatic.
worked with Well, when you have this much grey hair, you go through this quite a lot, and you learn these lessons. Somebody in the community that I'd worked with over a number of years was trying to describe contributing to a project that I was leading on before, and he said to an individual, there's going to be some fairly, what was the word? There's going to be feedback that might appear a little bit difficult, but it will be well reasoned and important to understand. And if you're willing to take on board the guidelines and update the code to fit, then you'll be welcomed into the community. And if it's not something that you're going to take on board, then honestly, work on your own fork, contribute something into a different community, or maintain your own project alongside. And people do, and that's one of the great things about open source. You can be in the core community, or you can be alongside it. You can maintain a fork or components that other people can contribute to and make use of. You don't have to agree to the way that a community is structured at all.
That's lovely. Lee, I imagine you're much more brutal.
Why'd you say that?
I know you.
No, it's difficult, right? Like, it is difficult. There was a time fairly recently, I think, somebody had created a PR without opening up an issue, and it was very much a preference PR. And in the end, I had to just say, look, we're probably not going to do this for this version. Like, this is something that is interesting, but this is also something that I'm going to need to maintain, which is an often overlooked aspect of PRs, is who's going to maintain that. And so I had to say, feel free to, run your own fork and use this in your own fork. Like, and as Andy says, that's the beauty of open source. You're not limited by the project's direction or opinions. You can decide to do things your own way, and that's fine.
Yeah, and just
sorry. I was just going to say, I have in the back of my mind a conversation with another excellent community leader I worked with in the past, who saw the project that I was trying to undertake when I started the Fyne project. And I said, we're going to have a clean API. It's going to be super simple for everybody to take on and build their own applications. And it's going to be excellent. We'll add lots of features, and it'll never be easier. It will never have been easier to build applications. And they sort of looked at it and went, okay, that's great. I can see you're off to a really good start, but you come back to me in 10 years and show me that the API is just as simple as it was when you started. So I try to think, and sometimes the no is just, that's outside of the scope of what we're trying to achieve here. However, because it's part of a wider community, you can have add-ons, bolt-ons, extras alongside the main project. And we've started to do that in Fyne. We have an extensions repository, much like the Golang does. It's a good model, actually. It works quite well. So you can have the things that might be part of the future, but they're outside at the moment, and the stuff that we're focusing on, and like Lee says, that the core team is willing to maintain going forward.
That's the approach we're going forward with version 3. It's plugins, so
Nice.
people can develop their own features.
Yeah, it's particularly tough when it's obviously, I mean, they're usually not like mad suggestions, so they're like sensible. And sometimes for me on projects, if you can do that thing in userland, if you can solve that outside of the toolkit, even though yes, it might be a bit more work to do it like that, sometimes that's the answer. And we kind of focus on enabling that rather than adding every feature in. And I have a little tiny, you mentioned Testify earlier, which I appreciate that, by the way.
Show notes.
Show notes. No, we don't need to put that in by now, do we? Yeah, let's put it in.
Testify. I'm only joking about
What does Wails use?
Is.
Oh, that's what I was about.
Have you heard of it?
Yeah, I was about to talk about is. The idea behind. I think you're talking about the same one. It's a mini version of Testify, and the idea was to have the smallest possible API. Testify's API grew quite a lot because it had the approach of really just like trying to, it was a developer experience. I wanted to make the tests so easy to read and reason about. So they ended up adding lots of capabilities. I don't know that we've got any sort of like instrumentation around that. We don't really spy on people, but it'd be quite interesting to know which of that API people use and what they don't use. And actually, you could probably write that, thinking about it, you could probably have tooling that did that. I'm sure someone's got a project. We'll have to just thinking about that. Okay. So, but anyway, the idea was it was Testify off steroids, and it was a tiny API, and the kind of the PRs that project gets are about sort of adding common things that people like to do. But there's one of the things you can do is just say is true, and you can put any statement in there, and things like this. So it's like you can solve a lot of problems in your test code, and then it keeps the is API smaller, and that's kind of preferred. But that's always a tough conversation, because the ideas and the contributions that people want to add, they're great ideas. It just sort of goes a little bit against the mission. So I think you're right about being clear about the mission of what it is and the principles that you're playing to.
I would 100% agree with this. The concept of extensibility, absolutely. If people can build something themselves, then it might get added later, but it unblocks their application here and now. And we try to make the widgets that we have extensible to some degree. We don't want to make them complicated because of it, but you can extend them. But at the bottom line, we're not using native widgets. We're drawing everything ourselves. And all of the widgets in our standard package are constructed with the same public canvas API that everybody else has access to. So if you do want to do something a little bit different, you absolutely can implement it in your own code. It's not, going to be just a couple of lines because you are doing something non-standard, but it helps in the cases where the businesses are just saying, no, we must do something like this, or this must be added. They, with a little bit of help on the first time they write a custom widget, perhaps have absolutely got their app off to a start that they would otherwise be stuck behind.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, it's that time. It's that special time. Natalie, you know what time it is, don't you?
Get
that
the
a
guitar
yes?
out, Matt.
Where you should continue.
This is it, everybody. Brace yourselves. It's time for Unpopular Opinions.
I actually think you should probably leave.
There we go. Wow, what a bop. I'm exhausted. Okay, what's your unpopular opinion, Lee?
So, my unpopular opinion today, Matt, is that the best tool for the job isn't always the best tool for the job. Now, what do I mean by that? Yes. How unpopular would that be? So,
Yeah, saying
reason I
something
say
isn't the thing it is it's going to be quite unpopular, I think.
controversial, one would say. So, as engineers, we always try and use the best tool for the job because we want to do a great job. However, if you're paying for your own time, that's fine. But if somebody else is paying for your time, then is the tool that you're deciding the best tool for the job as a whole? I was made aware of this recently through an article that was written by a guy I do not remember the name of right now, who basically said that he had a new manager who came in and they wanted to implement, I don't know, like a queue or something. I can't remember exactly what it was. And so they were like, oh, well, let's go, get this Kafka or like some technology that's designed for that. And his response
I thought you meant a pool
was,
cue.
Oh, well, I mean, a big fan of pool, big fan of playing pool.
Great, yeah.
We can
You
definitely
swim,
talk about that.
you swim much?
Swim, I got a pool, so that's good.
Have you?
Yeah.
Have you got a pool table?
No, I should do.
Have you
Well,
got a pool, really?
Yeah, I've got a table next to the pool, but I don't think that's what you're asking, is it?
No, you have to put it in for it to count, I think.
Well, I'll tell you what, I'll send you a photo later.
People living in Australia just having pools and that, would they? That's mad. Okay, sorry to interrupt.
That's all right. Where was I? Oh, yeah. So the new manager came in and said, well, what are you using currently? And I think they were using Postgres or something. And he said, well, for this use case, let's build it in Postgres. And the engineers were like, what are you talking about? That's crazy. But they did. And the reason why it was such a good idea was because it was a technology they fully understood. They had all the controls in place, so that if something went wrong, they could deal with it. Based on their use case, it was completely adequate enough. Like it was more than they needed. So whilst it's not the best tool for the job, it was the best tool for the job. And so that's an interesting thing I learned recently.
Yeah, I'm really into this actually, and I would say also in that case it was not adding a new technology as well. So not just they just understood Postgres enough, but you just have then one less thing to maintain and to operate, and I think that also is valuable. We do spend a lot, like I think a mistake we make is we forget about the maintenance because we just, I don't know, just think of it as like background noise to the main event of building and deploying and adding a feature, and get really excited about that. But often for projects that are successful, especially, maintenance is a far larger cost than the initial build, and having less in your infrastructure is simpler. So I'm kind of into this. I wonder how unpopular that's going to be.
Nice. Yeah.
Yeah. Any others?
I have an unpopular opinion that I could contribute here, I guess.
Oh, yes,
so
please, Andy.
my unpopular opinion today, and I didn't realize this was unpopular, but I've been, like I said before, we have a fantastic community in Go, in Fyne, and Wails and beyond, I'm sure. We're very lucky to have some sponsors that help make the project possible, and that's obviously the same for GoTime and other fantastic places. But I'm trying to find ways to support the project even more going forward to increase the reach. And at this point, I realized that perhaps I wasn't, not everybody was in agreement with me that, here's my opinion, developers will learn a new programming language to benefit from a useful toolkit. Because I assumed, the right tool for the job, you pick up the technologies alongside the tool and you learn what you need to. And once you've learned a couple of programming languages, another one isn't really that big a deal, especially one that's so familiar in its basic syntax. So I was absolutely confident that people would pick up Go to use some of these excellent new graphical app technologies. But apparently, some folk out there think this is not necessarily obvious, and it's a bit of a risk. So there you go. Apparently, it's an unpopular opinion.
There we go. We will test these opinions on our Twitter account at GoTimeFM, and we'll tell you, Andy, whether indeed that is unpopular or not. But that is interesting. I certainly would do that. I certainly would learn. The thing is, I kind of love learning new languages. For example, programming languages. Obviously, I'm British. I don't speak any other language. We're idiots. I'm into it. I kind of like. I'm nostalgic for when tech was hard. So when something gets easy, I sort of lose a little bit of and I like that drive of when it's hard and you can't do it. So I kind of like that. But yeah, that's interesting. I don't know. Anyone else? Any thoughts on that? Anyone?
I'm so much trying programming languages or writing things with AI that I can't see almost a barrier in trying something new. Write this thing in this language, use this tool or this kit, and then maybe benchmark will be fun.
Yeah.
It's almost the opposite of what you said of you went the hardship of studying, of trying a new language. It's like I slowly start to struggle seeing the benefit of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I'm not saying there's a benefit to it. There's not a benefit to most things.
If this is for fun, then yeah. 100%.
Yeah. Well, so you get the AI to write code for you instead, do you?
Yes.
Is that not cheating?
I don't know. Do you use any plugins in your IDE? Do you use any code completion?
No.
No, you use pen and paper.
It scans it in.
Yeah, it's punch cards all the way down.
Oh, I'd love that. Yeah, I miss it when tech was rubbish. I'm nostalgic for those years when
Just stop using Go.
yeah, just switch to Java. Sorry, Java people. No, I don't think Java people listen to this, do they? I don't know.
Ex-Java people probably do.
Well, then they don't care. They're not going to be offended, are they?
Probably not, but you
Probably
never
not.
know.
Yeah. Well, anyway, don't you know? But actually, so Natalie, then, when you're coaching like junior engineers or people that are new in tech, do you advocate for that? Do you sort of advocate for learning other languages and things?
I definitely advocate for learning things like concepts.
Mm.
You know, like missing the word. What's the singleton?
Singleton.
Design patterns, things like this, algorithms. You want to know those. Those are across all languages. Language is a tool to implement good ideas or concepts or reproducible things. And so the things that you can carry over languages, you should know. Learning exact syntax, less and less sold.
Yeah. Mm.
This is not the unpopular opinion, although it might be.
Well, we'll see. Yeah. Well, I don't know. What do you? But you do have an unpopular opinion, then.
I have another one. I wonder if what I previously said is also counting
Yeah.
as one.
I wonder.
I'll have to try that in another episode. But for this one, the unpopular opinion came at the tech test we had before this episode when we were talking about today being an equinox day. So in some languages, day means not. There's different words for day. The 24 hours go between midnight to midnight, and the daylight.
Mhm.
English is not one of those languages, and I'm curious to see how unpopular is this. But I think this is we're missing out here. We need two words for those two concepts.
Mm. Yeah, but so sometimes you might say, like, if I said, was it day or night? If I asked you that, I think
I would be very confused. Is this a 24-hour period or is this a night?
right. That would be
What
quite
are
an
you
odd
asking,
question,
Matt?
though,
What do you
wouldn't
want
it?
to know?
That's like saying, do you want some food or a burger? Yeah, it's quite
Especially
confusing.
if you have a window, you can sort of solve that question pretty easily as well. Not the burger one, sorry, the daylight one.
By looking outside, you mean?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Natalie, what's an example then of another language that has this distinction?
Hebrew.
Mm-hmm. And what are the words?
Day is yom.
Yom.
And so the 24-hour period that goes between midnight to midnight is
Yeah.
yom.
Mhm.
And the sunrise to sun... No, that's yemama. You got me there.
Okay.
Starting over. Midnight to midnight is the yemama, and morning to evening is yom.
Okay. So yeah, that is kind of cool. But I don't think it's held us back. Like, I've never noticed. No, do you know what I mean? I don't think I've ever.
Because it's the same thing in your mind, but I do notice that. I cannot
Yeah.
recall a situation right now, but I remember being in situations and thinking, but why? Why do you want to lose this concept?
Yeah. That's amazing.
Especially English being so rich and having so many words to describe so many similar things.
Yeah, but we
think-
just haven't bothered with that.
I think different languages, they do present a different viewpoint of the world. Like, and I think it's a real shame when languages die out and they get, extinct. So in Welsh, on this similar concept, the word for week is wythnos, which actually is 8 nights.
Is it?
It's
8
what?
nights?
8 nights.
8
Yeah.
nights. Do you have
Because-
8 days in Wales? 8 days a week? Is it like the Beatles in Wales?
Well, what time? Yeah, that's right. Yeah. What time does the day start? It's at midnight, right? And that's middle of the night.
Yeah.
And so basically a week is bookended by 2 nights.
Yeah, that's very true. So oh wow. And does that change the way then you'd think about the week?
In some weird way, maybe. I don't know. Not really. But I just think it's amazing that you can I think it's a real danger that you lose so much insight into the world that different cultures and generations have had.
Yeah.
And it's all down to language because it's the way you express those concepts.
Yeah, a classic example I love is apparently for the word bridge, because some languages, this is another thing. My unpopular opinion can be this is not shouldn't be a thing. I can't say that, but genders
That can be
for
an unpopular opinion.
yeah, but genders for things that like in they have it in French and German where like you have a table and there's like, oh, that's a masculine table or a feminine table. I mean, like each word has its own gender. I just find that to be quite bonkers, really. But apparently, if you ask somebody that's probably offensive, isn't it? But it just blows my mind, is what I'm saying. But if you ask somebody in France, the word for bridge is masculine in French, and if you ask somebody to describe a bridge, apparently they will tend to use typically masculine language, like strong and it's robust or whatever. And in German, apparently, it's a feminine word. Is that right, Natalie?
Yes.
And apparently, if you ask someone in Germany to describe a bridge, they're more likely to describe it as elegant and beautiful and use more feminine language, typically feminine language. So it's like really interesting to think that just the very language that we use to express ourselves changes the way we actually think, which is kind of amazing.
I'm really curious. Like, does this apply across the board? If so, I'm really intrigued now to know, is the Go programming language masculine or feminine, and are different toolkits inside the language described differently? I think that's perhaps not the intellectual question I thought it would be.
Well, but new concepts, that's the thing, new concepts that come out, like, does someone have to, is it obvious? Is it sort of like there's an intuition that everyone's like, oh yeah, that's this new thing, that's obviously masculine or feminine. Like, how does that work with new stuff?
I think you try to find the closest existing thing
Yeah.
and from there infer.
Oh, it blows my mind. It does blow my mind. By the way, Lee, dwi isio dysgu siarad Cymraeg achos dwi caru Cymru.
Da iawn. Chwarae teg chdi.
Bit of Welsh there on go time. Welsh is a 4,000-year-old language. Is that right?
It's pretty old. It's older than me. Only just.
I have to ask, how do you say, is there a different word fingers and for toes in Welsh? Is this fingers and toes, or is this like hand fingers and foot fingers?
Yeah, it's hand fingers and foot fingers, basically. Yeah.
It's amazing. I've been noticing this, that in old languages, this is how it is.
Yeah.
New languages like English, it's just two different words. But in Mandarin, in Cantonese, in Hebrew, and in Welsh, it's fingers. It's just fingers.
Yeah. That is amazing. I guess it's just one of those things you can't make a breaking change once you've done it, once your language is there, and you just reuse things. And then when you come to do the new language, you're like, do you know what? Never mind not knowing what a day is. I need to know if you've stubbed your finger on your hand or not, or if you've stubbed your finger on your foot. But to be honest, I think we should. Yeah, I need to know quickly. I've only got a quick, very small window. But I think we should start using foot fingers, because I actually have an Indonesian friend who said that to me once. And obviously, I'm a big baby, so it was hilarious to me. Foot fingers, I love that. But I
would you be able to type? Would you be able to type more quickly if they really were foot fingers? Would you have like two keyboards, or just like smash all over the existing keyboard?
Yeah, actually, that's a good point. Are they? They're still toes, though, right? It's not like it's not. They're not actually fingers.
So I have a little theory about this, and I think it doesn't work with the timelines too well, but maybe with the way we perceive things or something. But with the hands, you obviously can do this, which practically any other mammal cannot.
Do what?
Fingers, you cannot touch with a toe.
Yeah, it's a podcast, though. It's a podcast, Natalie, isn't it?
Thumb, yeah, with this thing. You're right. With the thumb, you can fingers, but with the foot, you cannot. And this is a good reason not to call that fingers. So this is kind of, later on with time, we figure this out.
I know somebody with an opposable big toe, and they would disagree with you.
Oh, wow.
They could pick up a remote control, TV remote control with their feet, yeah.
Wait, their pinky can touch their big toe. Their little toe can touch the big toe. Yeah.
No.
Do that. That's why it's toes and not foot fingers. It's not fingers, because fingers can only is where the pinky can touch the toe.
If you broke your foot, you could.
Yeah.
You mean your low hand?
I think that probably comes back to the idea that it would be a breaking change, and you might need a new word to describe it at that point.
Congratulations, that was brilliant.
Excellent work.
Matt just lined it up for me there. It's okay.
That's
Perfect. No, this is good. Save that one. That'll go in the special. That's going to go in the special hits. The what they're called? Top hits. No. I've got an unpopular opinion. This one I think might upset some people. Hopefully. I mean, not hopefully, but hopefully. My unpopular opinion is the Wails logo, the Wails app logo, is the best app logo in the world. If you haven't seen this beautiful red dragon, what's the story behind this, Lee?
Yeah, so I wish I could claim it. I have the design skills of a 2-year-old, so I had to outsource it. So the original logo was something I saw as a kind of tattoo style, those sort of tattoo style dragons that you get. And the reason for that originally was because it sort of looked Asian, but it was also sort of kept that dragon link back to Wales. And for version 2, I thought, you know what, I just want a really impactful logo. It's a big release, and I just want to make it into something a little bit bigger and have something a little bit more special. So I asked around, put on Twitter, does anybody know any graphic designers? And eventually, don't ever do that, by the way. My goodness, you get it's like saying you've got a job for a 300K a year. You'll just get so many respondents. And one guy in particular had sent me some portfolio, and it was really good. And I thought, this guy's probably out of my price range, but we had a little chat and had a bit of back and forth, and he just came up with this brilliant logo, and I was like, yeah, like there's not much really I want changed on this. This is impactful. It was really good. So yeah, so that was the story there. So I started using it, and I've had some great feedback about it. But yeah, I can't claim it, unfortunately. But yeah, brilliant work.
Yeah. No, brilliant work. We should say that the Welsh flag, it might also be the best flag in the world. I don't want to get into this.
I think it won a poll.
Did it?
I think it won a poll. Yeah.
Flags need polls, so that's good. But have you seen the Welsh flag, everybody? Natalie, have you seen the Welsh flag before?
Googling right now.
Google it. You won't believe it.
I'm going to Google this right now.
We'll put a link in the show notes to the Welsh flag. You won't believe this is a real flag, and it is.
I like the dragon. It's also a red dragon.
Mm-hmm.
And it's walking on grass. And has clear white.
Yeah, that's clouds.
It's a bit cloudy.
Why is it white? It's just a sunny day, is it?
That's it.
But what a flag. Okay, well, I'm afraid that's all the time we've got today. But thank you so much. It was so interesting to learn about Fyne and Wails and cross-platform coding and community open source, running open source projects. Andy Williams, thank you very much. By the way, love your soundtracks that you make. I know you did Jurassic Park. Classic tune.
It's too good to be true.
You've got to mix all this stuff together. Creativity is a big part of software engineering, after all.
Yeah. What is Spielberg like?
Honestly, he doesn't have as much time for me as I would have thought, given the close relationship that I've read about in the press.
That's a shame. That is a shame.
Maybe we could reach out one more time and try and maybe get his input on the next GopherCon, see if we can really mix something together.
I mean, the intro, the promo video would be pretty amazing, wouldn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah, I can't wait to see it already, actually. Let's just get it sorted.
Absolutely.
Hey!
Lee Anthony. Oh, this is meant to be an outro. No, not hello. It's goodbye bit now. Lee, thanks for... Go on.
I just don't want it to be goodbye. I just enjoy myself so much.
Yeah. No, it's good. That's a good lie, that is, because...
Yeah,
that's going to make the edit. Definitely something you said will make the edit now. Now you've said that.
Can you make that my unpopular opinion?
Lee Anthony from Wales and the Wales Project, Andy Williams, and Natalie Pistunovich, of course. Thank you very much. See you next time on Go Time. We did it!
Wow.
We're still live. I say that for Lee. He's got a foul mouth.
I know! That's why I'm quiet most of the time. I'm like, I'm never going to be able to pay for the legal defense of this.
We'd just bleep it. We'd just play a klaxon if you did it, so there's no problem. Get the edit. Yeah. No, that was great, though. Thank you so much. I'm going to end the live recording. So thanks for watching live and hanging out with us. So I don't know why my camera keeps doing this. I think it sees a face. It's either confused that my face is real, or it's the gopher on my shirt, and it's something's throwing it off. It's never moved around this much. It's really obnoxious. It's like I've got my own cinematographer, director of photography, isn't it?
Do you
Paul
think
McCartney
while
into the shot.
Sorry.
I was just thinking, while we're still live, it would be really interesting if anybody was watching to be able to have them go, oh, graphics with Go is really interesting. Because one of the things I've noticed over the last couple of years is it doesn't appear in conferences very much because it's put together, with who's going to go in mind. And so we kind of got this almost vicious circle of it's not presented because it's not popular, so people don't see it at the conference, so they don't investigate it, so it doesn't gain popularity. And I don't know if anybody else thinks it's something that we could try to do something to encourage or at least explore whether people want to see it out and about more. But because I think was it not the case that the developer survey that the community did showed it was like 8%, maybe 9% of people are building apps with Go, with some kind of graphical or front-end component. We actually did a follow-on survey. The Geo project and Fyne kind of collaborated on a survey, and one of the things we looked into was, are you part of the Go community? Did you respond to the survey? We found that of the people who were doing graphical stuff, like half of them didn't respond to the community survey because they were like, oh, well, we're not really doing standard Go stuff. So I wonder if there's actually more people doing it than we realized. I hope I didn't just completely stomp on a part of the exciting live segment wrap up there, but it was just something that came to mind.
No, this is all still recorded too, so that may well get into the mix. Natalie, have you seen many submissions? Natalie, of course, runs the GopherCon EU conference, excellent conference.
Europe.
Which
We're
is,
not
Yeah.
Europe. We're
Sorry.
not excluding
I'm sorry.
people outside of the EU like yourselves.
Thank you. No,
Um,
I've got a blue passport now though, so who's laughing
Who's
now?
laughing?
Still not us.
in 2018,
No,
we
we're-
had a talk. In 2018, there was a talk by Matt about rendering with Go. So visuals,
Matt who?
not exactly GUI. And in 2020, I want to say there was a talk by Preslav on generating images with Go. So we do get the okay.
Yes.
At least those two come to my mind right now. The agenda will be announced in a week. I don't think to offer any visual thing this year.
So shout out for people that are interested in this. Let's get you submitting CFPs. Let's get you in the conferences. And I'm sure if
Practically all
you,
the CFPs are closed. That's a
yeah,
it's a good thing to do, but not now. For the US, it's closed. For the it's closed. No.
yeah.
Maybe
Well, there's
next
always
time
local
go.
meetups.
Yes.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. I mean, I will go just about anywhere if they're willing to have me talk with them about building apps and graphics, and actually generally Go and a beer makes a good combination as far as I'm concerned. So I'll get along to plenty of these places, and
Berlin is
hopefully
We meet every second
okay.
Wednesday of the month.
I actually might be over there later in the year, so that I'll have to arrange something there. Yeah, that'd be cool. I think there's like an open source conference in somewhere nearby, and I was going to stop into Berlin on the way there. So yeah, cool. That sounds really good.
Nice. Are you going to take the sleeper train? There's a new sleeper train from London to Berlin.
That's a good point. I don't know. Honestly, I'm just so far north. It might be easier to fly over the water and then, like, I do love a good train journey. Don't get me wrong, but the ones on the continent, let's face it, they are a lot better than that we can seem to afford here in the UK.
Yeah. Things aren't going well here, are they?
Well, I mean, maybe not in some ways, but there's now more to talk about than just there's now more to talk about than just the weather if you want to commiserate over a pint at your local.
That's true, yeah. We do tend to be quite miserable, and now we've got a lot more material to be miserable about. That's fair, yeah. Good point.
Yeah.
I know, but the sleeper train to Berlin is attractive because, sleep is great.
Yes, that's a good solid point that you make there, I must admit. I'm struggling to defend it. Although, is it not the case that when you're traveling, you're building a presentation to give where you go? So if you're taking a sleeper over there, then you're already losing some productive time possibility.
No, Andy, that's what other people's talks are for.
Yeah, of course. I forgot this. I am learning so much today. Good tips all round.
So how far does the sleeper train travel? I'm interested. How far is it that you would go to sleep? Like, how long is the journey?
Good question.
Is it?
I mean, it's going to be
2
more than...
hours?
No. Well, you can... That's just nodding. I wouldn't call it a sleeper train. That's just you can nod off. That'd be like a nap train. That's what that would be. I don't know. How long is the journey there? London to Berlin.
How far's Berlin from London?
Well, by the train, I don't know. Yeah, it depends
It's
how
the
far
same.
zoomed in you are.
Yeah, sorry, I'm really not.
Oh
helping
wow,
you now.
looks like it's 16 hours.
Ooh.
I
Where's
think
it
a
go
lot
via?
of the time, the sleeper trains, like, they pull out of the station and then just park in a siding for a few hours and then pull in when you want to arrive. I'm not kidding.
Oh, really?
Seriously.
Oh, is
Yeah. So there is
Well,
a
like it's
sleeper
like a
train
Premier
from
Inn.
London.
It's like
Yeah,
a Premier Inn on
but
wheels.
It's like the lorry park in Kent.
It's more
trying to get
that,
over the
yeah.
border.
That's our best theme park now, Lee.
Can't wait.
But yeah, there is, because there's a sleeper train from London to Edinburgh, and you can do that during the day in 4.5 hours, I think. But the sleeper train takes roughly 8 hours, so you get a full night's sleep.
Yeah.
And I think it's sort of fairly close to Edinburgh. It pulls in and it just stops there for a few hours, and then pulls into the station when it thinks it's time for you to wake up.
Oh, I kind of don't mind that.
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
it
it's
pulls
very
into
clever.
pulls into a tunnel, so it still looks like nighttime.
Well, remember, it's heading up to Scotland, so it's always going to look like night.
Sorted. Yeah. Well, 16 hours is a bit of a stretch, isn't it? It's not very expensive though, but it's very green as well, of course.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. Well, this is a bit of an after-show party.
Yeah.
Some gold in there for the editor. Yeah, we can dance if you
Do
like.
you remember last time I came on was my sound all right this time?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Was it okay? Do you remember last time I had like those headphones on and the sound was awful? And I jokingly said, "Oh, it sounds like I'm on the ISS." And thinking like that's, really far away. And so I looked it up. It's 250 miles above the Earth, which is from central London to Morecambe. It's 248 miles from central London to Morecambe. And I was thinking, so looking at the orbit of the ISS, did you know that the ISS is always closer to you, Matt, than I am? Always.
You're joking? No, it can't be always, can it?
Not when there's a good conference on and Matt's emceeing, surely.
Hang on. What do you mean always closer though? Because what about when the ISS is over Australia?
Well, it's over the equator, isn't it? Like it does
it?
fluctuate. Yeah, it does fluctuate. but it's still 250 miles.
So, yeah. To be fair, the reason I haven't gone to Australia is it's too far away. So I probably will go to the ISS first.
I mean, I would be close. The ISS would be closer to me than to you, but it would always
Let's
be
meet
closer
there.
to you than me.
Let's meet there then. We'll meet there for a beer.
Well, I always thought it was in like deep space or something, you know? Like I always thought it was miles away. But
Yeah, that
I
is
mean,
mad.
kind of, yeah. But
Well, the
it made me
atmosphere is only 60 miles. Like, so once you know, most of it. So like, if you think of the Earth and like how thin the atmosphere is around the edge of like that's kind of mind blowing. Or unless you're flat earther, I don't want to. You know, everyone's welcome.
I think Jacob
Maybe.
was just saying in the Go channel that there's not many GopherCons particularly far north, and I'm guessing he means in Europe. So if we're thinking about GopherCon ISS, we should probably put one slightly further north on this planet first, or there might be some feedback.
Okay, interesting. Well, but the GopherCon EU though was in Iceland one time, wasn't it, Natalie? Not EU, GopherCon Europe.
I
Southern
missed
Europe
that. No
was
way.
in Iceland. Yeah,
it
this
was
was the
amazing.
talk with the light rendering, with the Bray lights. And there's also GopherCon to Berlin, right? And at some point there was also Nordics GopherCon, which is arguably also north.
I think Nordics would definitely tick the box, but I don't think it's happened in a while.
Yeah. Yeah.
I really hope we see a lot of conferences coming back, which I know they're starting to do, but there used to be a really fantastic page of all the places that you could go to talk about Go at conference settings and events. And a lot of them just aren't happening. I drop into the Slack channels of the various geographies if I'm traveling and see what's going on. And I would say probably half the time folk are like, oh yeah, we've not really picked it back up yet.
Yeah, I know. It's sad. I think also like people, we still aren't quite. I don't think we're going out as much. Like we got so used to just being in. I certainly like. It has to be a conscious thing. I have to like. I'm going to go out into the world.
Is this
By
an
default,
age
it's
thing,
won't.
though?
Oh, maybe Natalie. Thanks, Natalie.
I will say that I became very mindful of it this week because this week I spoke with a group of MBA students and I was thinking we're roughly
Basketball
the same
players.
age, and I got a reminder that no, it's
Oh,
been
really?
a while since university.
Yeah. Yeah, it's when like.
I'm aware of my own age right now.
Oh
So
no.
it's for me, it's easier to be better or like explain better into why I'm leaving the house these days.
Right.
It's
Yeah,
being
it could be
old
that.
and the pandemic. It's both.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, to be fair, like I do see people and they just look like children and they're like 25 or something, but they do just look like children.
Yep.
Weird.
Signs of being old.
Yeah. Thanks, Natalie. Really
I had a harsh
appreciate it.
awakening.
We're on the same
We
page.
were-
We're in the
What,
same
this morning? Just
side
this
of the
morning?
millennium.
I'm sorry. I was trying to go on the age thing. Recruiting engineers for a company I was at recently, and we hired somebody who'd never heard of Back to the Future before, and I just thought,
ridiculous.
oh my goodness, how old am I? Like,
That's insane. The movies travel forward in time, not just that one. All movies travel forward in time.
movies.
You can,
Yeah.
and that's such a good movie even now. All the first two are amazing. Like,
That was
I can't
40
believe
years
I've
ago.
never heard of it.
Goodness. I almost had my T-shirt today, which is it's like goodness, maybe 6 years old now, but it's Now is the Future because it was like celebrating the was it 2019 or something when they travelled to the future.
Yeah.
Instead, I had to settle for this lovely FineConf swag. So.
I've got the.
Oh my word, that
Yeah.
is amazing.
I had a big
Everybody got
birthday
excited
recently.
because we saw this
Oh yeah.
meat from the DeLorean.
Yeah.
Date counter? That date?
Yeah, I don't know. This is
Oh,
where
and the
this is where
DeLorean.
you're going. Or not. This is Scalextrics. I've got the Knight Rider and Back to the Future Scalextrics, and it lights up. You see the little flux capacitor. Kits, lights move backwards and forwards. Yeah, my it was a big birthday, and the theme was basically all the stuff I loved as a kid. So I've just got all these
Amazing.
toys again now.
As a kid? Are you still a kid?
That's a
you're still
brilliant
kid, aren't
theme
you?
for a birthday.
Yeah, it's not bad, is it? Made me feel not young, but what's the word? Oh yeah, old.
Nice and cozy.
Yeah.
I don't really think that people should grow up at all. What's wrong with having toys when you're older? I don't get it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
You can get those adult colouring books, can't you? That's a thing.
Yeah.
Adult colouring
It's
books.
like mindfulness thing, isn't it? Have you tried it, Lee?
I haven't, no. Like I said, I
No.
got the design skills of a 2-year-old.
No, I don't think you need design
You can still
skills for
colour
that.
in.
That's not design, Lee.
It's any kind of artistic anything. Like, I just, apart from music maybe, but yeah.
So
It
the whole
involves
GUI thing
crayons.
is kind of
No,
dealing with it.
that's it.
Yeah.
That's it. We went
Did
to a
you-
park recently, and there was like, we just turned up, and there was like 5 DeLoreans in there.
What?
And we were like, what? Yeah, I didn't know they made that many. Like, there was,
Well,
it was
it
insane.
could just be one that's travelled through time. And
Maybe,
met up.
like 5 times.
Yeah.
And then just
and they've
like,
all met
up
up
by-
at the same time for a fight to see who's the like. You can fight 4 of your other selves to see who's the strongest. Just as an idea, or go for a drink with yourself. Like go and hang out in a gang. Go out, have a stag do. If you're getting married and you have a bachelor party and you've got no friends, you could just travel through time many times all to the same point. Put different t-shirts on, obviously. Just
I've been told by many people if there was more than one of me in the world, then there would be a lot of trouble.
How many people have told you that?
I want to not know the answer to that question. I find myself a very stereotypical engineer sometimes, and I just love a good argument. And if you put too many people like that in a room, basically it's not a room that you want to go into.
Yeah, but you're so polite and approachable, and I feel like it'd be all right. Or is this just all a show for the podcast?
No, I think that you can both be a reasonable and polite person and still know how to have a pretty solid argument. You know, you don't have to be shouting to be in violent disagreement with somebody.
Yeah, no, but I mean, like, if it's polite debate, I think that's amazing. It can be.
It can also be embarrassing. So I had a conversation like this in a restaurant many years ago. 2 or 3 of us sitting around a table. It was some beers and then it was some dinner. And at one point we realised the folk in the next table were sort of leaning over and listening. Oh. And we just sort of looked at them like a little wallet and it's like, is everything okay? Turned out it was a couple that were visiting the UK from Germany. And they said, oh no, it's excellent. We're really getting it. We're enjoying absorbing the local culture. And we thought, oh no. We're really doing a disservice to the country.
Yeah. Oh, that's nice. You're just listening in. What were you talking about? Do you remember? Not the war.
It was a long debate over whether everything, or sorry, no, the question in point was, can anything be justified? I think.
Okay.
That was the topic of conversation.
I'd lean in and listen to that. Can anything be justified? What a great topic.
Unpopular opinion.
I can't even remember which side I was arguing.
Yeah. Amazing.
Oh, dear me.
All right, great. We do have to end this at some point, so that time has
Well, I have to
come.
go to
So
work.
I'm gonna stop the recordings now. Oh, it's the start of the day. That's mad.
No, 20 minutes.
I can't imagine it. All right.
I
I'll
stopped my
stop the
local
recording.
recording a while ago.
Oh, okay.